welcome to another book review video. Today it is the second instalment in the Bridgerton series, that being The Viscount Who Loved Me by Julia Quinn. This is, as I said, is the second book of the Bridgerton series. If you haven't already seen my video of the Duke and I, it is up in that corner up there. I would heartily recommend you go watch it. So this probably hardly needs much introduction. At the minute, Bridgerton is everywhere gearing up for season 3, which is Colin and Penelope's story, which skips to the 4th book. But I am only on the 2nd. Now, this one hits different for me because reading the prologue at the front, it actually made me feel quite sad. And not sad as in, oh my god, that's so sad. But sad as in, oh, because it details Anthony Bridgerton's, he is the eldest of the siblings, his relationship with his father Edmund. From him being the eldest child, spending the most time with him, with all his hopes, his dreams for the future, and Edmund was to Anthony the perfect father, someone who Anthony looked up to, someone who he wanted to emulate, who he wanted to be, and no one ever was better than his father. And I've found this quite sad and quite, heart-wrenching because it reminded me of my own relationship with my father, and how I viewed him as a child, how I viewed him growing up, and then to lose him in the book, it's so sudden and unexpected, like it was in the series, but it was just so vivid in this. And don't worry, that's the only vivid part of this book. Don't even get me started. I will get there. We'll get there. Believe me, we'll get there. But it time shifts, as the last one did, to the year 1814, which I think is the year after It's only a few months after the events of the last book, which is where Daphne and Simon married and did their thing and went off. And we are introduced, after the prologue, we are introduced to Kate, Edwina and Mary Sheffield. Not Sharma as it is in the show, but Sheffield. And we're introduced to them in this book the exact same way that we are introduced to Daphne and Violet Bridgerton in the first chapter of the first book, by them reading the latest scandal sheet from Lady Whistledown. And the replica of the beginning of this book, compared to the first one, doesn't stop with Kate, Mary and Edwina being introduced by reading the same scandal sheet that Daphne and Violet were, in exactly the same setting, with exactly the same banter. It doesn't stop there. It switches then to where it had switched to Simon and Anthony talking in their club about Simon being back, etc., and setting that up. This one does exactly the same thing. Exactly the same. It's just the names that are different. Some of the dialogue, not much. We skip to Anthony's viewpoint at this gentleman's club. The same gentleman's club where the first chapter had Anthony and Simon in the first book. And they are more or less having the exact same conversation, except Anthony is now having it with his brothers Benedict and Colin. And he outright tells his brothers that this is the season that he intends to get married. Because internally his thinking is that because he doesn't view himself as a better man than his father, then he won't live past the age his father had, which was 38. Don't even get me started. That this is the season that he should get married, because he won't live past 38 and he's getting on in life. He's only got a few years of life left. But for this paragon of womanhood, he has 3 distinct rules, set down practically in stone. The first one is that she should be reasonably attractive. I mean, it's not like he's going to be spending much time with her if he's going to pop off at 38, But that's rule number 1. Rule number 2, she can't be stupid. Because so many of the ladies of the ton and the aristocracy have nothing but feathers in their brains. Of course. and all they can talk about is dresses and marriage and children.
I've never understood the fashion for feathers in the hair. Why would a woman want to draw more notice to the fact that she's like a bird squawking for a man's attention in some bizarre ritual?
Third, and most importantly, she cannot be a woman that he will ever fall in love with, because it would be too hard for him to leave her bereft, as his mother had been bereft when his father died. He couldn't put somebody that he loved in that position, so he's going to put someone that he doesn't love in that position instead, who's mildly attractive and not stupid. Why the ladies just weren't fawning over him and lining up to marry him? Oh, of course they were. I'm going to give myself a headache the amount of eye rolling I'm going to do in this video, just so you're aware. And then he asks his brothers if they know who the diamond of the season is. And if he's out in society as the head of his family, why the hell doesn't he know? But nonetheless, and they reply that it is Edwina Sheffield. And he just says, I'll marry her then. He doesn't know if she's attractive, and he doesn't know if she's stupid or not. But she's the diamond, she's the best. So he's going to marry her anyway. Love that she has a choice. But at this point, he just says, right, that's the one I'm going to have then. But I will say that although the copying, practically copying, she's copying her own work, but it's copying nonetheless from the first book. The one thing that this author gets right, especially at the beginning of this book, is the awfully amusing banter between Anthony, Benedict and Colin. The brotherly conversation, the brotherly banter, that is written well. And I enjoyed reading that. It was quite fun to read. And this especially comes to light at one of the first balls, and he gets the first introduction to Kate Sheffield, who is Edwina's elder sister and guidance, and she looks out for her. And this is all set up. The series didn't actually do it like this, but Colin is an extremely mischievous younger brother and loves nothing more than setting up his eldest brother Anthony in the most amusing situations for society. I was here for it. I loved reading it. It was fun. And that continues. I felt for them all round. The anxiety, the embarrassment. I get it. The second-hand embarrassment. I felt it. And Colin's antics. So much fun. And I'm a little bit annoyed that they didn't, show that bit in the show. Because they showed so much in the show that is not in this book, which it should have been. But that bit was, you probably should have had that bit in the show, because, it was the only good bit. Now I get it, if there's a long time between first books and second books when you're writing them. I'm not a writer, so I'm just assuming. But this was written a year after or at least it was published a year after, or the same year that The Duke and I was published. And at the end of A Duke and I, in sort of like in the epilogue of the first book, there is a little like a little note that says that Nigel Burbrook married one of the Featherington daughters right at the end. And yet in this book that's just retconned, and Nigel Burbrook is one of Edwina's suitors. Get it together. Make a list. Make a list of who's with who and stick to it. That annoyed me. It annoyed me. It's a niggle, but it annoyed me. And another thing that annoyed me that is absolutely just so unforgivable is a quote on page 85 where they're talking about Miss Edwina is ill in bed and she can't go to this ball, and Kate doesn't know whether she should go with her mother and leave Edwina behind, or whether they just should not go at all. And her mother, where Kate says that Edwina will be lonely without us. Fair point. But Mary didn't even bother to look at her as she answered, Edwina has a novel to read, the latest by that Austen woman. She won't even notice we're gone. That Austen woman. The disrespect. That Austen woman. Who gave us such amazing characters. Elizabeth Bennet, Fitzwilliam Darcy, Bingley, Wickham.
I'm no longer surprised at you knowing only 6 accomplished women, Mr. Darcy. I rather wonder at you knowing any.
That Austen woman. I'd burn it just for that insult. Just unforgivable. Unforgivable, insulting. Awful. And apart from that quote, which made me want to punch it, one of my main criticisms with this book is that it's a copy of the first. To all intents and purposes. And I'm not just talking about the first chapters, which are a carbon copy with just like names changed. I'm talking about the plot of what little there is. The way that Kate and Anthony have to get married after being caught in a compromising position in the gardens is exactly the same way that Daphne and Simon have to get married in the first book because they were caught in a compromising position by Anthony in the gardens. So yeah, if you want to get married, wander around the gardens and get caught in a compromising position with somebody. I'm not saying do that. Don't do that. But I loved reading it. It's like watching reality TV. It's a guilty pleasure when you read these. Because this one is better than the first. It had me interested in ways that the first book didn't. And I think that's to do with the characters, and more specifically the character of Kate. Because in the first one, I thought that Daphne was a naive ninny where Kate she's very strong-willed, she's opinionated, and she's not afraid to stand up for what she believes is right. I like it. The slow burn enemies to lovers, the build-up of tension in all these pages, the build-up is immense, and I was so here for it. I like the tension build-up between that. I don't like a big payoff at the beginning. I like it to slow burn. Which the series got really well, and the book got really well too. And it had definitely improved from the first book, that tension between the two main characters. Loved it. And another thing I didn't like about it is that it was well written and I was invested and I really liked the character of Kate. And the banter and the tension, mainly the banter that was had between her and Anthony, all in the lead up to their marriage and saying I do, disappointed me when it fell into the mushy, lovable, soppy trope. Right after Kate says I do, she seemed to lose every inch of her spine and just fawns over Anthony the whole time for the rest of the book. I did not like it. I didn't like that switch up. I thought, just keep it bantery. For God's sake, just, stick to what you've done. But who am I? She has millions more than I do. And Kate lets Anthony get away with the most toxic behaviour imaginable. If he had been like this before she had married him, she would have given him a piece of her mind, and she just doesn't bother. And the end was just so crammed with stuff that didn't need to be there. It's like the author thought that, we've had all this build-up of tension, let's just try and cram in as much plot as we can in this, last few pages. Because the whole traumatic thunder, nightmares, death, with her mother, death scene, violence, hit me out of nowhere and it just wasn't needed. It's here. This is the rest. This is the beginning of the book and this scene is here. The traumatic plot scene is like 3 pages at the back. just don't include it. If you've got this far without it, you don't really need it. But let's face it, I'm going off about how shitty the plot is. We don't read these for the plot. We don't watch these for the plot. Let's just be honest. They're a guilty pleasure. They're the Mills and Boone of this age, and we don't. The plot is secondary, really, when you have, yeah. But remember to like this video and comment down below what you think of this book. If you've read it, if you want to read it, if you've watched the series, what your thoughts are on the characters. Let me know in the section down below, and as always, keep reading.